This morning we are blessed to have one of the best candidates I've met so far in our Republican field with us this morning. The former governor of the great state of Florida, Jeb Bush, is with us this morning. Guy like that. Now, I was talking to the governor behind the stage here, and I was asking him, how in the world did you finish the University of Texas in 2.5 years? I assumed it was because not only is he brilliant, he's a student, he said, because I fell in love. So now I know how to finish school in 2.5 years. Got to fall in love. Well, he was one of the most successful governors in the history of the state of Florida, one of the most important and successful governors in the entire country. He led the fight for one of my favorite issues, school choice. Here's a governor who understands how to get things done. He's cut budgets. He's balanced them. We could use that in Washington, D.C. Please help me welcome the great governor of the state of Florida, Jeb Bush.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, General. Thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And your brother.
And my mother. Thank you all very much. I am so honored to be with two great public servants. Congressman Gowdy, you showed what principle-centered leadership is. You've done an extraordinary job in a difficult challenge. I've been in the limelight myself a few times, and it's not easy, but you did it with dignity and grace, and you brought the truth out. The simple truth is that we weren't told the truth. In the midst of a campaign, we weren't told the truth. And they used to make movies about the fog of war to create confusion. This was the fog of war because we were in the midst of a presidential campaign. It's just not right. And the fact is now people now know the truth. And I appreciate the fact that you've worked hard to do that. And there'll be more information coming out, and I know you'll do it in a fair way and a right way because that's the kind of person you are. And if I could be about a tenth as popular as Senator Tim Scott, then my life would be a lot simpler, that's for sure. It is such a joy to be with you all. I had a couple of comments. We're at this great school. They won 52-8 last night. I don't know if anybody goes to this school, but not bad. Undefeated. Friday night football, man. There's nothing better. And the second thing, I wanted to just make a comment. When I was governor of the state of Florida, we had 8 hurricanes and 4 tropical storms. You just went through an extraordinary period where your great governor stepped up when there was floods all across this state. And I hope you'll pray for the people of Mexico, where a Cat 5 storm, in fact, the most powerful storm in modern history just hit Mexico. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention, Hurricane Patricia. This is a time when all of us, particularly in America, we act on our heart and help people. I know what it's like when people lose everything, because literally we had $200 billion of losses, uninsured losses and insured losses, 8 hurricanes and 4 tropical storms in 16 months. And so whenever I see something like this, like happened a couple of weeks ago here or in Mexico or wherever, I pause and at least reflect on the power of these storms. And it's important for us to act on our heart, and hope you'll do that and pray for people that are in harm's way. I want to tell you a couple of stories about why this election is important, and then we're going to have a conversation. Workforce participation rates in this country are lower than they were in 1977. In the age of Obama, 6 million more people are living in poverty. That should be on our heart. Stuck in poverty with no hope of getting out. The middle class hasn't gotten a pay raise in a long while, and in fact, during the age of Obama, disposable income is down $2,300 for families in this country. People have lost hope. And they're angry because they see the dysfunction in Washington. Budgets never passing, just kind of passing the buck on. the debt growing, our economic prosperity is at risk, and then we see what happens around the world without American leadership, where these new threats of terror and nation states just running rampant on top of the greatness of this country. People are legitimately angry. But I want to talk a little bit about leadership, and I'm going to tell you two stories that kind of show why I'm running. One of them is about 1998. I ran in 1994. I lost. In fact, if you look in the history books, I might be one of two Republicans that lost in 1994. It was a pretty good year, if you may remember, for our team. I lost, and I had all these great ideas, and I wanted to put them into practice. And I realized I didn't show who I was. I didn't listen first and learn. So I decided to do it differently in 1998 when I made up my mind to run. I was going to wander around and listen. And I was in a town hall meeting, a little bit smaller than this one, in Fort Lauderdale, and a woman got up. She was bursting. Her head was about ready to explode. So I always try to find ways to alleviate people, so give them a little therapy by letting them ask their questions. And this woman gets up and she says, "You don't care about me. You're a conservative. You don't care about my family." And I go, "With all due respect, ma'am, I don't even know you. How could you say that? I have a child with developmental disabilities. Republicans don't care about families like this." And so we had a little bit of a dialogue, and I finally said, "Look, I'll give you 4 days this month. 4 days. You can schedule me any way you want. I'm your student. You're my teacher." And she did. And so we went around South Florida, and I went to group homes, and I saw how the developmentally disabled could be treated with dignity and respect. I went to places of work where they were hiring people with severe developmental disabilities, and what I found was customers loved it. It brought joy to their lives, and employees loved it as well. I saw the institutionalized care that cost a whole lot of money, the typical top-down driven approach, but people weren't treated with dignity and respect. And this experience probably made me the most, as a politician or aspiring one, know more about the developmentally disabled than any person on the planet. I listened, and then I led, because when I got elected governor, the federal judge was about ready to take over this program because it was underfunded and no one seemed to care. And I promised that I would go to the legislature and fund the programs and transform them. And because I met Bertha Aponte, a Democrat or an independent, she certainly wasn't a Republican at the time, and Milton, her husband, and Luce, this precious girl, I learned and then I led. And 30,000 families got care that they otherwise would not have cared. And the simple fact is, people that have this challenge in their families, their biggest fear is whether or not they're going to outlive their child. Wow. Now, if we're not on the side of people like that, who are we for? Who are we for as Republicans, as conservatives? I transformed this program, and many people got a chance to rise up. I believe that life is a gift from God. I believe that everybody's an asset. Everybody can make a contribution. The left believes that we're going to manage the liabilities, that people just need to get in line, we'll take care of you. America doesn't work that way. America works when everybody's God-given talents are given, or everybody has a chance to pursue their dreams as they see fit, and everybody's talents, the assets they have, they can make a full contribution. I know how to do this. I took on very entrenched interests, and as a committed conservative, we lifted people up. Second story. This is a story of a woman I met last year. Her name is Denisha Merriweather. Denisha had a tough family life. One of her brothers was in prison. Her family just was a tough family. It's not dissimilar to what exists all across this country. And she was held back in third grade. And she was held back again. My guess is that no one put their arm around Denisha and said, "I love you." My guess is that they basically said, it's your plight in life to basically where you were born, your zip code really defines your destiny. You're not capable of being successful. There are a lot of places in this country where we have people that never are given a chance. Well, Denisha, thank goodness, had a godmother who knew about the corporate tax scholarship program of Florida that I fought for. I mean, talking about fighting. You got to fight hard when you're going against the teachers' unions and the bureaucracies and everybody focused on the economic interests of the adults. You have to fight on behalf of kids. We were 50th in the country in graduation rate in Florida. We couldn't whisper, "Thank God for it, name your favorite state." Literally 50th. And kids in poverty were never given a chance. And the kids that were in the middle class weren't achieving what they were achieving because it was always someone else's fault. And so Denisha got a chance to go to a Christian school based on us turning the whole system upside down. And my guess is in 3rd grade, this angry young girl, someone put their arm around and said, Jesus loves you, so do I. You're capable. You have the capacity to learn. You're gonna soar in this school. And she overcame those 2 years of being held back, and she was the first in her family to graduate from high school and college. And now she's getting a master's program. And let me tell you, there are a lot of Denisha Merriweathers there. I could care less whether she's a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. I've never asked. But I know she's going to live a life of purpose and meaning because a committed conservative changed things that were broken, and she is now soaring. And there are 250,000 kids in Florida that are grade-level readers because I took on some extraordinarily powerful interests. And Florida went from 50th out of 50 states to now the national average in our graduation rate. Each and every year, because we put reforms in place, kids now are learning to be able to dream now the possibility of getting a job and going to college. The net result of principle-centered leadership is, by ending social promotion in 3rd grade, of having the first statewide voucher program in the country, Senator, the second statewide voucher program in the country, the third statewide voucher program in the country, tripling the number of kids going to charter schools, ending social promotion in 3rd grade, raising expectations across the board. True accountability is that Florida has had the greatest learning gains across the board. And that's what you do. Look, I don't tell you this story to say that I want to be the head of the federal government school board. Trust me, there should be no involvement of the federal government in the creation of content or curriculum or standards, none at all. But we need principle-centered leadership not to prey on people's fears or their angst or their anger. We got a lot of people doing that. There are a lot of big personalities on the stage. A lot of them. One particular huge guy. But that's not going to lift people up. What about the 6 million people that are in poverty? What about $2,300 less of disposable income in the middle class? What about workforce participation rates lower than they were in 1977? Appealing to people's anger and fears aren't going to solve those problems. It's going to require a leader who has practical experience of 32 years in the private sector and was a governor of a purple state, the biggest swing state in this country, who applied consistently conservative principles to cut taxes $19 billion, to veto projects that weren't necessary for the budget, that made government live within its means, where you can fire people in Florida for incompetence. There's no lifetime employment, where kids... where we went to AAA bond rated in a state that doesn't have an income tax because we were frugal and we lived within our means. But we put the most vulnerable in our society in the front of the line rather than the back. And Florida rose up, 4.4% income growth each and every year, and the government was cut because I believe what's important is people's income rather than government's income. We need that in Washington, D.C. We need to have less talking and more doing. More focus on solving problems. So if you're looking for someone who has a heart for people, and if you're looking for someone who can disrupt the old order to change the course of this country, who has the skills to do it and the passion and conviction and energy to do it, you're looking at the guy that you need to support in February in the primary, and I believe with your support, I'll be the nominee, and I will take it to the Democrats with hope and joy rather than anger and fear, and I will apply conservative principles as a candidate just as I would govern. in the right way so that we can lift this country up one more time, just as we've always done in the past. This is still the most extraordinary country on the face of the earth. This still is the greatest country on the face of the earth. We just have to start acting like it again, and it requires leadership in Washington to work with these two great elected officials and many others to lift our spirits again. We'll survive the problems we face. We'll survive even Barack Obama. But we cannot allow a third term of Obama economics and Obama foreign policy. We have to win this election, and I know how to do that too. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Governor?
Yeah.
It appears that you've already won, so this is good. Thanks for coming. Now we have an opportunity really to hear the questions from the audience, and I have a question of my own that I'll start us off with because I think you ended on a very important note, which is how the chief executive of this country leads. It's an important conversation that we need to have. And as I said at the beginning, I just returned from Guantanamo Bay, where for the first time in 53 years, we're going to have to wrestle with a president who vetoed the military, the NDAA. First time. And hopefully we'll override that veto, but it's slim pickings. One of the bones of contention in the NDAA is the president wants to have the opportunity to move the enemy combatants, the world's worst terrorists, to a domestic location, to include one that they've already took a look at here in South Carolina, right around the corner in Hanahan, South Carolina. If you were the chief executive, how would you handle Guantanamo Bay and the enemy combatants? Would they come here?
Plain and simple. It's just, this is not, I don't think this is too complex. This president is trying to fulfill campaign promises rather than do what's right. Across the board, if you think about it, eliminating troops in Afghanistan, for example, after fulfilling a campaign commitment to do the same in Iraq, 10,000 troops in Iraq would have kept ISIS from even being created, in my mind. Similarly, in Afghanistan, he wants to fulfill a campaign commitment, but he now realizes that the same thing would happen if we do that. I mean, we have troops in Korea and in Japan and in Europe for good reason. It created stability and allowed for a secure world, and it helps us in our national security to do that. And he violates the common sense and the advice of commanders and the military leaders to fulfill campaign promises. At some point, you have to have the humility to recognize, well, that was a stupid promise to make, and that you need to adjust. And in this case, I hope he does that. He clearly is not, but the Congress, I hope, won't go along with that.
Thank you, sir.
Governor, Jimmy from Monk's Corner has put his finger on a question a lot of folks in South Carolina have, which is how do we protect Israel in light of the president's position with respect to Iran?
So, I've been to Israel 5 times. I'm inspired by its people. You know, everybody talks about the rowdiness of our political process. Wow, go to Israel. It's like, that's a contact sport plus. I mean, it's like gladiators. It's alive. The spirit of the place is incredible. The shared values of the state of Israel with this incredibly diverse group, their commitment to entrepreneurial capitalism and innovation. It's an inspiring place, and it's an important ally for the United States, the most important ally in the Middle East, for sure, without a doubt. So, 2 lessons of the last few years and lessons of history. One is your personal relationship with a prime minister or a leader, even if you don't like the person, should not get in the way of damaging the relationship. I don't think my dad had a great relationship with the prime minister that served with Shamir, I believe his name was. But yet, when Operation Desert Storm took place, the United States had the influence and the alliance with Israel to say, don't react when the Scud missiles come. We're going to take care of this. Had Israel reacted, it would have created real dislocations in an incredible coalition that made our efforts successful. And that relationship, even though their personal relationship was not good, was hugely important, and it worked out. The United States did its job. Israel showed deference, and it worked. Now the personal relationship, because President Obama's gotten his feelings hurt or something, has destroyed the relationship with Israel, and you could see it. I mean, yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, this extended article about how the cooperation in terms of intelligence gathering has been shattered. There's no trust. So the next president needs to restore that trust, and there are a couple things that we could do. One is to fulfill the commitment that Congress has mandated, which is moving the United States Embassy to East Jerusalem, which would show a commitment that we're all in on the sovereignty of the State of Israel, which I think we have to do in this world of topsy-turvy. And you look at Europe moving away from Israel, you look at the world moving away from Israel, the United States needs to stand tall with our strongest ally. Secondly, I believe it's now time to show support beyond that by allowing Israel to have access to the most sophisticated military equipment to be able to send a deterrent effect to Iran. Iran does not think right now that we're serious. They think, I believe, that they can not enforce the agreement that the Congress didn't get a chance to approve as a treaty, which I thought was a sad fact. And Iran now doesn't believe the United States is serious. They believe Israel's serious, and if we gave them the capacity to strike, I'm not suggesting that happened, it would create a deterrent effect. And Iran is ambitious beyond just Israel. They have a stated objective of wiping them off the map, the people we were negotiating with. They also have a stated objective of trying to undermine the entire region. They're the largest supporter of terrorism in the world. We have to confront those ambitions across the board. This is not just about a nuclear agreement. It's also about their ability to use conventional weapons to have their way. We are giving Iran $100+ billion of fresh capital and allowing them to export oil, and this president will veto congressional action to allow for the export of oil by our own country, creating economic prosperity for our country and allowing oil to be used as a positive national security tool. The days of Obama have created so much uncertainty that we need principle-centered leadership, obviously in the economy, but also in foreign policy as well. And the first job, I think, is to restore the relationship with Israel, because from that creates security. One important point that I never quite understood until I spoke to some leaders in the Arab world. When we have gaps between Israel and the United States, when there's doubts about our capabilities and commitment to them, the rest of the Arab world looks and says, well, the United States can't be a serious partner with us. They're not even going to support Israel. We're going to have to take actions ourselves. And what we're going to see if we don't watch it is the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the Arab world as well, because the United States no longer is a trusted ally. We have to restore this. If we want to create a more secure, peaceful world, America has to lead. And we're not leading right now. We're part of the community of nations.
Karen Parker of Charleston wants to know, how would you bring jobs back to America and increase opportunities for small businesses?
There are more businesses being closed today than being started. First time ever in American history. I mean, think about that. We led the nation in small business growth when I was governor, and it wasn't because I had a government program. I have a small business creation government program. That's oxymoronic. That's lacking. That's like the Department of Energy having a venture capital arm and picking winners in the renewable energy business. How'd that cylinder thing work out? You know, markets work, freedom works. So how do you create a free market where people pursue their dreams and have the capacity to achieve earned success? That's the mission. Well, you would start with the most convoluted tax code in the world, which is the United States tax code, with all the well-intended carve-outs and deductions and credits and all these things, because that's how they roll in Washington. A lobbyist gets, they're either there to protect the sanctuaries for people, the incumbents, to kind of run without having competition, or they're there to create a little bit of an incentive, and people become dependent upon these things. We should lower rates as far as possible and eliminate as many deductions, and my plan does just that. I believe we should have the lowest corporate rates in the industrial world or close to it. I've proposed a 20% rate where you eliminate all the carve-outs and deductions, the left-handed Albanian tax credit and the right-handed Croatian, tax deduction, all these things. You shift power down. You get the rates to the lowest possible, 5 percentage points lower than China, for example. You allow for full expensing of all capital investing, and you eliminate interest deductions for corporations, where equity is what matters and where you're not rewarding leverage and debt. The financial sector does really well in the world that we're in now, where you financially engineer. You can create real wealth for a handful of people, but you're not creating high-wage jobs. That system, as well as reducing rates across the board, my proposal simplifies the code to 10%, 25%, and 28%, eliminates deductions, and puts a cap on the ability to have deductions. Person making 40 grand, a family of 4 making 40 grand would pay no federal income tax anymore. They pay the payroll tax and other things. The middle class would get a $2,000 tax break. That would create a burst of economic activity. And then if you focused on rules, which is the other place that uniquely is a presidential prerogative, wherever possible, by the way, Counselor, the president should use only the executive authority they have. I know you'll appreciate that, being a man of the law.
Yes, sir.
So, I would repeal, let me see if I can remember every one of these things, but by executive order, any of the rules that are in work. And so the Waters of the United States rule, this massive rewrite of federal authority as it relates to water. The Clean Power, so-called Clean Power Act, which is a massive overreach of going way beyond just source pollution to requiring states to come up with plans to lower carbon emissions and creating loss of economic activity. The methane rule, the ozone rule, the net neutrality rule. I mean, you go through the whole alphabet soup of government, and the president stopped talking to these guys in Congress and started acting unilaterally. We need to restore democracy and shift power away from Washington, D.C. This idea that Washington... Much of what we have allowed Washington to do is not really what the founders envisioned Washington to do. And so using the 10th Amendment as a guide, I think we should shift transportation back, education funding back, and delegated authorities for environmental policy and many of the other transportation policies. I trust Governor Haley to decide what the priorities of South Carolina are. A lot better than a president or the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. You jumpstart the economy by making it simpler, more transparent, making the field fair for everybody, not trying to, I mean, one example, you got me going on this. Hillary Clinton gave a speech about the shared economy, and she was kind of bemoaning the fact that people participating in the shared economy don't have benefits. She wants to create the 20th century on top of the 21st century. So an Uber driver is going to have mandated benefits, I guess, and they're going to have to require this and require that, stifling all the innovation that comes from this extraordinary movement of using information technology in a way that dramatically lowers costs for consumers and allows for a whole new way of living where people actually can customize how they work and customize how they live. Sounds like a pretty good idea to me. So she gives this speech, and I happen to be in San Francisco, so I decided I'm going to a company called Thumbtack, where you can go get, you go online and you can get any professional help you need. It's an extraordinary little business. Everybody's under the age of 40. It's not a single person within a square mile was wearing a tie, I can promise you that. And we had a great dialogue. I took an Uber there to make the point. There were like 25 press people watching this. And I wanted to make the point that why would we protect the incumbents, the taxi cab medallion owners, the people that have the franchise with the airports. There are a whole lot of people that restrict and try to contain progress rather than what I would call just letting the big dog eat. When the big dog eats in America, people's income rises. When we try to not unleash the animal spirits, the dynamic nature of this country, we see what we have. Wages that are suppressed, income that's in decline, jobs that aren't being created, and small businesses not being formed. We got to get over this and get beyond that and move into the 21st century, and I believe I can do that. I probably got into a huge local conflict, didn't I, about Uber? They're probably fighting that here.
Bush, from time to time, people in politics will say, I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for X or Y. Literally, Senator Scott would not be where he is if it weren't for a lady on the very first row that just caught my eye. I believe I see Tim's mama on the first row. Am I right about that?
She looks way too young to be your mom. That's got to be the senator's sister.
I thought sister too, but that's his mama.
No way.
Senator Scott has a couple of relatives in the military. One of the first images I have of your father, or what I knew about your father, was his service in the military. Barbara from Charleston wants to know, in a state that is as pro-military and pro-veteran as any state in the country, what would President Bush do to restore our military?
First of all, Governor Haley, every time I'm with her, says that South Carolina is the most military-friendly state and the most veteran state. And I've always bit my tongue because South Carolina is really important in the primary process. Let's just say, that a close second place is Florida.
There you go.
So last night I came here and we went to the Yorktown, and we did a little film in honor of my dad for Veterans Day, and I got into a TBM Avenger. That's the plane he flew, not his particular plane, because that one didn't quite make it. That's still in the Pacific somewhere. But my dad was the youngest Navy pilot in World War II history, and Tim, like you, I was blessed when I woke up in Midland, Texas, 62 years ago. And my little eyes opened up, and there she was, a gift from God, my mama. And I'm blessed with a family that I wish everybody could have had the upbringing I had. I mean, put aside the fact that he's a hero and my dad's the greatest man alive, and I would kill for him and violate laws and everything else. He's just been an incredible father, an inspiration to me in every way. And I think we need to do two things to reverse two trends that are quite damaging right now. One is rebuild our military. This idea that the president is vetoing the defense bill for the first time without having a specific element in the bill that was a problem that could be reworked is really not just a symbol. It is it shows his heart. And what we need to do is replace this president with someone who has a heart for the military, because it's how we are kept safe. It's the first priority. Embedded in this bill are some great ideas about procurement reform. There's some really serious work that was done in this in the House and in the Senate to make sure the dollars are extended. No one suggests that there should be $800 toilets and all that stuff. In fact, there ought to be a real commitment to taking a business-like approach to this. But we're now underfunding the military to the point where people around the world see it. And our friends no longer trust us because of our words without actions, and our enemies no longer fear us. Trust me. You think that if we had a strong military and a strong president, that China would be building a military base 100 miles off in the South China Sea? If the president's so concerned about environmental policy, maybe he should go after China for building something in the middle of the South China Sea that's a military base. We have to restore our strength, and so the military needs to be rebuilt. And the second thing the next president has to do is bring a hammer to the Veterans Administration and reform it so that veterans get the care that they deserve. And that is essential. Your two great elected officials are now confronted with having to fund, for example, a hospital in Aurora, Colorado, that started out at $300 million. It's now at $1.8 billion. And it's not, they need funding to be able to finish it. Really? So if I was President of the United States and I saw that, I wouldn't immediately think, let's create a shiny object so people don't follow it. Let's blame somebody else. Let's say the dog ate my homework. This is how these guys roll, man. It's all about blaming somebody else. It's the video. It's the video. It wasn't a real terrorist attack on 9/11 when people asked for security. It's always, At some point, leaders accept responsibility. And when that happened when I was governor of the state of Florida, apart from a few profane words I probably said and, underneath my breath and said, God, this really is angry, then I accepted responsibility and fixed it. We need to have a president that starts fixing things, and the Veterans Administration is first and foremost. You should not have a government agency with 330,000 employees, with a 60% increase in the budget, that has bonuses for management for taking people off a waiting list and not giving them care, and people die. And 3 people have been fired. If you want to get angry about that and hold people to account, because I'm angry and I know you all are angry. We need to fix these things across the board. Show respect for veterans. They've earned it. And right now we're not showing respect at all. They should be given a card to have more choices. And Veterans Administration will get a lot better if vets have a choice to go to a private provider or a private hospital. I guarantee you.
Governor.
I did notice you had my dad's socks on.
Yes. I was wondering how long it was going to take. This is my way of honoring the Bush family right here. So I picked up the habit
you did
a couple
nice
months
job
ago.
with that.
It's worked out really well. Thank you. I'm not quite sure what to say next, but I'll find something.
Oh, Lord.
Speaking of your parents, Governor, your mother attended a school here locally, Ashley Hall, and
Model student, I'm sure.
Myra Finneran, who is at Ashley Hall,
Oh, really?
has a question about education. Her husband is the principal here at Bishop England. Her question is, how would you reform the education system to ensure that all students, no matter their zip codes, the ethnic background, poverty, receives a quality education?
Well, this is, I'm not just passionate about this. Most people would probably suggest I'm, like whatever the next level of craziness about this. This is the great calling for our country. And the challenge is the president, is not the place, the Department of Education, the federal government is not the place for this to work. But a president is not just the administrator of a big beast, the federal bureaucracy. A president is the leader of the country. The president is the prime minister and the king, if you will. The president needs to lead. The president has the power to convene. The president has the power to shame. The president has to put energy behind a few things. And the simple fact is today that we're going to tear the social fabric of this extraordinary country. The one thing that has defined us more than any other country is the ability to rise up. It doesn't matter historically where you start in life in this country. It's your efforts to achieve whatever your dreams are that creates success. And we have so many examples of it. And today, as the economy changes, as technology makes the first rung of the ladder higher and higher and higher, education becomes perhaps the most important thing we have to get right. And here's the deal. A third of our kids, and I will argue and fight, this is something I know. A third of our kids are college and or career ready. Now, how could that be? We got an 80% graduation rate and everybody feels good. Little Johnny gets a piece of paper that says he's a high school graduate. The simple fact is that kid can't go, half of those kids that have a high school piece of paper, they go to the community college and they have to retake high school reading and high school math. And you certainly can't imagine that little Johnny being able to fill out a form to get a job other than a minimum wage job. Can't get a career out of this. So we need a complete transformation. And here's where the federal government can play a role. First, the president needs to say, who's fooling who? Stop this. Stop it. It's ridiculous to think that everybody's doing well, that every child's above average. It's just not true. We have to have a wake-up call. We need to have an intervention in this country to recognize that where we are is not where we need to be, and the rest of the world is catapulting ahead of us. And then secondly, the federal government's role in this needs to be secondary to what goes on at the states. But anytime a state has the courage to transform these government-run, politicized, adult-focused monopolies, the federal government ought to be a partner in disrupting that relationship and moving to a child-centered system with higher expectations for every kid. So I'll give you an example. In Nevada, another one of my favorite states, not nearly as important as South Carolina, but right after. It's in February, so the February states are important. I'm spending a lot of time there. Brian Sandoval, a really great governor, and the legislature, led by Republicans, created an ESA, which I know is exactly what you support, and I totally support Senator Scott's efforts in Washington to do this. So we're attached at the hip at this. Why not have, if a state has an education savings account, in effect in Nevada, any parent can send their kids with that scholarship amount, which is equal to the state and local funding. I mean, this is a big deal, to be able to go to a private school. If that's what, that is the ultimate goal. The federal government money for Title I, for IDEA, for early childhood education should follow that. And if you get to that, that's America. Move into a student-centered system where everybody's competing for mom and dad's dollars or mom's dollars or whatever it is, you're going to see disruption like nobody's business. And whether it's a traditional public school or a high-performing charter school or a private school or this school or any school or homeschoolers, you're going to see rising student achievement. The role of the government is to create high expectations and then to make sure that it's a fair playing field for everybody. And I just know that God has given the ability of children to learn. And we should be recognizing that and not put lids on their aspirations or put societal kind of, oh, it's too bad you're in poverty, there's no way you can learn. Yeah, really? That is just such a joke. And it's so embarrassing that people sometimes say that out loud.
Amen. Amen.
Just one other quick point. The career element of this is important as well. The #1 degree program for students in this country, university students, is psychology. And I'm sure there's some psych majors in the crowd, and fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think we should dictate people's majors. But I just don't think people are getting jobs with psych majors. And so maybe a little more focus on career orientation. We have huge shortages of electricians, welders, plumbers, information technologists, nurses, teachers. The skills that you can immediately get a job for, we have big shortages. And then we have surpluses of people getting degrees where they can't get jobs and they have to start at the very bottom, working in minimum wage jobs. I mean, there should be some focus on the relevancy of education as well. And many places get this right, a lot of places don't.
Governor, I am living what you just said. We have a son. The son.
You're an unemployed lawyer?
I will soon be there. The little
I'm
boy.
not worried about Congressman Gowdy. I think he'll be fine. In fact, if I ever get in trouble, I'm looking you up, brother.
The little boy you met at the restaurant in Spartanburg went on to become a philosophy major. And if any of you are going through the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A in Spartanburg, I want you to say hello to him. Actually, he is, not shockingly, he is in law school. And Matthew from Charleston has a question about student indebtedness. As you know, Governor, because of your passion for education, the indebtedness rate is at an all-time high. The default rate's at an all-time high. What do we do about tuition and indebtedness at that level?
So one of the reasons why Obamacare has been a disaster, and it just keeps on, it's the gift that just keeps on being a disaster, is the expropriation of the student loan program. I mean, literally, this is what Latin America, I mean, I was a Latin American studies major in my two and a half years, so I rambled through it pretty quick, but this is how they roll down there. I mean, they basically, by decree, they expropriate private sector enterprise, and that's what we did in the student, jamming it down the throats of Congress. No Republicans supported this. And now the government's in charge of the student loan program, and it's not a surprise it's doubled. It's not a surprise the default rates are higher. It's not a surprise the forbearance rates higher. It's not a surprise that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and whoever else is left in the Democratic primary are proposing relief, because it's not fair. They create the problem, then they make it worse by adding to it. And the debt grows, and off we go with more dependency on government. There's a better way. in Florida, the lowest tuition rate for in-state students in the country is in Florida. People can get a 4-year degree in 4 years in Florida. Professors teach. I know that's a radical idea. The only institution that works less than, no disrespect to your great public servants, less than Congress is higher education. They're operating on a 3-day work week in higher education. You can't get a class on Fridays in schools. There is no focus on saying, you know, you measure a degree completion for full-time equivalent students. You may vaguely remember, I can vaguely remember this, that 15 credit hours used to be full-time. Now it's 12, because God forbid that a student would actually have to go to class 15 hours in a week. I mean, just put it in perspective, 15 hours, assume you studied an hour for every hour in the class. I don't remember that, but some people say they do that. That's a 30-hour work week, for crying out loud. Anybody here worked a 30-hour work week? I mean, 60 hours is the norm for people that are aspiring to a better life. And so we've dumbed it down. We have a 6-year measurement for degree completion for a 4-year degree, and 12 credit hours is a full-time equivalent status. And it's all financed on the backs of students, recourse debt. And it's doubled in size in the last 6 years. This requires a totally different approach. And my suggestion is the universities ought to have skin in the game. When a student shows up, they ought to say, hey, that psych major deal, that philosophy major thing, that's great. I mean, it's important to have liberal arts. I'm not for narrowing the curriculum on campuses. It's a great place to learn and to broaden out your intellectual capacities. But realize that you're going to be working at Chick-fil-A or going to graduate school. You have to realize that. Psych majors, realize you're going to get an MBA maybe or something else, because you're not going to be working in this field. Give students information. Make professors teach. Make a 4-year degree possible to get done in 4 years. And then have the creativity to put more accountability on schools. In Florida, if the degree completion rates drop and it doesn't meet the expectations of the state, the universities lose money. If they achieve better than what's expected, they get money. And guess what? Degree completion rates are going up rather than down. That's what we need. And the state provides support, both need-based and merit-based, through the lottery, where at the University of Florida, any entering freshman doesn't have to pay tuition at all. We don't have to resort to Washington, D.C. being the solution to this. In fact, I think there's pretty good evidence that any time Washington gets involved in any of these important places, they screw it up.
Governor, one of the objectives of a campaign is to distinguish yourself from your colleagues and others who are running for the same office.
Yeah.
One of the
That's what I hear.
We're hearing the same thing. This is good. This is really good. And one of the areas of topic of concerns will be the foreign policy footprint in our military. And so often we look around the room and we're kept safe by people who will put on the uniform. And as I look around the room, we have law enforcement officers in uniform and some out of uniform that really deserve our appreciation and our affection and our thanks for how you serve the community. Let's take a second and thank them right now. We are about 10 minutes from the conclusion, Governor, and I'll ask a question, Trey will ask a question, I'll ask the final question and give you a couple minutes for a closing comment. But as I think about the men and women who keep us safe here locally and throughout the country, I'll tell you, Paul, that the fact of the matter is that we have men and women who don the uniform to keep us safe as a nation. Yeah. And one of the questions that needs to be answered is, as President of the United States, what would be your approach to ISIS and Islamic terrorism?
Sure.
There's no question that today we have a president who is unable to form a sentence that includes Islamic terrorists are a major part of our foreign policy and a target that we need to eliminate, the extremists.
You're completely right. In fact, I don't think he's used the term Islamic terrorism or a version of that, which is pretty striking because that's exactly what it is. Sometimes you have to take your enemies at their word. When they say they want to annihilate Israel, take them at their word. The mullahs that we negotiate with, you know, when these guys who on a principle basis oppose the Iranian agreement, the President of the United States says that they're in cahoots with the Death to America crowd. Wow. You're the guy negotiating with the Death to America crowd, creating an agreement that puts the United States in a position of weakness and puts Israel, you know, in a horrific position. And similarly, as it relates to Islamic terrorism, the exact same thing. He's admitted twice this year there's no strategy, and he cannot use the term for what it is. It's a law enforcement exercise, therefore, and everything is lawyered up. Literally, the sorties that go out have lawyers on top of them to approve it. It's not a war. It's not a threat to Western civilization in his mind, and he's wrong. With all due respect to our president, he's wrong on this, and we need to create a strategy recognizing that this threat is coming our way. And so I'd got a chance 2 months ago actually to lay out a strategy at the Reagan Library, which was, every time I go there, it's just so awe-inspiring, because I think the president, his approach was the right one, peace through strength, and acting on the national security interests of the country and not, you know, blaming somebody else or talking about red lines. President Reagan could give a mighty fine speech, but it was more important how he acted than his eloquence. This president is eloquent, but has no interest in acting. And a strategy would mean that you would have to engage in Iraq, where you embed with the Iraqi military, where you arm directly the Kurdish forces, where you re-engage with the Sunni tribal leaders that we did with great success under David Petraeus, where the surge worked. It was a courageous act. Men and women lost their lives in uniform, but it left Iraq in a stable situation. When we pulled back, that void now is filled with this caliphate, and we need to re-engage, not with, you know, with us being the end-all and be-all, the world's policeman. That's not what I'm suggesting. But without American leadership, we're not going to see any action. We need to make sure that our sorties are strategic, which means we need to reestablish forward-leaning military presence to be able to take out ISIS. And as it relates to Syria, this has been made extraordinarily more complicated by inaction. The red line, the fact that the Syrian Free Army is considered a bunch of accountants and pharmacists, this trash talk has yielded chaos. Chaos. And we need to engage. We need to take out both Assad and ISIS. And this will require the United States This won't be easy because you have to create an environment where there is a third way, that there is a force that could actually govern in a way that doesn't slaughter its people. And the Russians don't care about this. The Iranians are supporting Assad to undermine the region. The Cuban forces are there. I mean, this is just like trampling over the United States. They're just laughing at us as we have no clue what to do. Well, I know what to do, and it's to create a strategy and garner the support of the region that desperately is looking for American leadership. That's how you are serious about this. And finally, there's one other element of this that is deeply troubling to me, which is that Christians and moderate Muslims, people acting on their faith, are being slaughtered, persecuted and slaughtered. I'll never, it's etched my soul, and I think about this all the time. On the shores of Libya, the great success of smart power, Secretary Clinton's terms, not mine, where Christian cops were being beheaded one after another, 19 of them. They were saying the Lord's Prayer. But for us, who? Who but the United States cares about these things? And it doesn't look like we care as much as we should. And whether it's the slaughtering of Christians in Iraq or the Yazidis or the slaughter of innocents in Syria, we stand for things in this country. We have values that matter. And when we see these things, normally, the United States rises up and takes care of these things in a way that shows who we are. And right now, we're losing that. And I think we need to restore that, not as the principal driver of foreign policy, but an important element of it. Because right now, the world has been torn asunder by the lack of leadership of the United States. And I know when I see these things, it makes me angry and it breaks my heart, but I know that we can act. And we have to act. We have to act. Thank you. This will sound partisan. I know this is a love fest, but you talked about the differences. So I was in a town hall meeting in New Hampshire where a Syrian American woman talked about what's your strategy, and I outlined the strategy, and she was excited that I understood the plight of her 11 family members that barely escaped out of Syria. They're stuck in Turkey. And the day that I gave this, the same night, Donald Trump was in New Hampshire. He wasn't in a town hall meeting, but he was giving one of the big rally speeches, you know, the big guy on the stage. And his comment was on television the same time that I was doing mine. And I gave basically that same response. And his comment was, the day I'm elected president, every Syrian refugee will be sent back. So, you know, you think about what we stand for as conservatives, and you think about what we stand for as Americans. We're not the world's policemen. We can't solve every problem. I got that. But there are things that only America can do. And if we don't stand for people that will die because of their faith, wow, we have really lost our way. And I think Donald Trump is dead wrong on this, and I believe I'm right. If this is broadcast, I'm sure I'll find there'll be a Twitter attack coming my way. Wow, it's really going to leave a mark.
Governor, I think the people in this room would have taken every single one of the men that were on the beach in Libya. And that's what I asked people. How many of you would have taken one of those men that was about to be beheaded?
Absolutely.
And in my hometown of Spartanburg, we would have taken every one of them. So. Governor, I'm to the point in life where my classmates that did well in law school have become judges. And most of them ruled against me when I was a district attorney. In fact, I got some of the worst rulings from some of my closest friends. And I say worst in jest because you have to have a friend even sometimes that says, look, I still like you, but I disagree with you.
That's right.
I was watching one of the presidential debates, and I heard you be asked to give an account for a judicial pick that your brother made, which I thought was curious since you didn't make the pick. But then my mind immediately went to this. There are three parts of that decision. And every conservative that I know thinks two of those three parts were absolutely expertly written by Chief Justice Roberts. The Commerce Clause part and the Medicaid part. They do take exception to one of the three.
Yeah,
but if we've gotten to the point in our judicial politics where if you are wrong on 1/3 of one opinion, we no longer want you as a judge, I can just tell you, good luck finding a perfect judge. I did not in the 16 years I was in a courtroom. So good luck doing that. What judicial philosophy would this President Bush have? Not the ones we've had in the past, but this one.
Well, first of all, the guy that made this comment was supportive of the guy that he was critical of. That's Washington world, man. I mean, that's the way they roll there. You know, he literally supported John Roberts, and then after the fact, with the power of hindsight, this amazing power that only people in Washington have. The rest of us apparently don't have this skill. He can opine the way he wants. I mean, anyway, that's what I think about that. How you would go about it, I think the lessons learned are the following, that you need to have someone that has a consistent judicial philosophy. That means you have to have someone who has a record. That means you have to have someone who's been in the job. The theory about getting confirmations done in the past is, let's get someone with no record because then it can't be attacked. That's kind of how we've changed our world, both as candidates and people of the judiciary. The better way is just to, make sure that no one actually can attack any particular ruling, because God forbid, you get 99 things right and you miss one, you're going to be bludgeoned. I think we need to fight for the next Supreme Court justice, which means that you have to have someone that has a proven record. I believe the judiciary, and this is what I did as governor, is the humblest of the three branches. It should be deferential to the legislature. It shouldn't try to legislate and invade the prerogatives of the executive, and more importantly, the legislature. There's enough they can do without intervening in the affairs of taking over, as I mentioned, the programs for the developmentally disabled. I don't think the federal judiciary should be doing that, or intervening in legislation. So a respect for the Constitution, a deference to the Constitution is the first priority. Some people that have intellectual acumen to draw people towards, this is a collegial process, you need people that are smart, that have integrity, but a proven record. And then you fight. You fight, because it will be ugly. These decisions are hugely important for the future of our country. If you believe in freedom, the Supreme Court is going to play a constructive role, or it's going to be the opposite. If you believe in a free society, the courts play a big role. And there's lots of things that are going to come in their way over the next decade, and the next president needs to fight for his or her nominees like nobody's business. So the more you have an experience record that proves their consistency there, the higher the bar in terms of the political fight that's necessary to get them done. And I pledge to you that I will do that.
Well, Governor, this has been a fantastic treat to have you here with us. We're down to our last question, and I'll let the last word that our audience here be from you. And I think we've enjoyed having the governor here.
Thank you.
Governor, Governor, I think that's probably a really good point. The little girls in the front are doing this right here.
Oh, yeah, it wasn't me. I was responding.
Exactly. I think he was saying, thank God it's over.
No.
I do believe, Governor, that the next president of the United States will have to be a person who understands the DNA of hope. We need someone who will bring this country together. We've seen it happen in South Carolina from the shootings of Emmanuel 9, where our state came together. This flooding that we've seen, neighbors been helping neighbors, strangers helping strangers. It's been amazing. As President of the United States, how do you bring our country together and lead us into the promised land?
Well, I'm no Moses. Just for the record, Moses got him there and then didn't make it.
Right. It's better to be Joshua, actually.
But it showed leadership for sure. Look, I hope you get a sense that I have a servant's heart. I think we need servant leadership in this country. We don't need Somehow we've changed the whole dynamic about leadership, where if you actually, like I just did, said I think we need people with a servant's heart, that servant leadership matters. That's a sign of weakness. That's just ridiculous. A person who can assume that people that disagree with them aren't bad, aren't evil, whose impulse isn't to push someone down to make themselves look better, will have a fighting chance to forge consensus to fix things. In this administration, we've had a gifted president, and I don't ascribe bad motives. I just think he's wrong on these issues. If you start with the premise that someone may not be wrong in terms of what their motives are, but are wrong as it relates to the policies, you can then persuade people about a better way. If you assume for a moment, I'll give you an example. This president believes in criminal justice reform. I think the federal government ought to get out of the criminal justice business as much as possible, and states ought to decide these things. We got a lot of people in prison that have created nonviolent offenses, many of them in federal prison. There are a lot of conservatives that believe that, and the president believes that. But his impulse is to do this by executive order or by the clemency process, rather than going to Congress where there is a left-right coalition to be able to get something done. I would do the opposite. I would start with the premise that people don't have bad motivations, they just might be wrong, and that we could persuade people. If if you assume that people aren't bad people, you actually can reweave kind of the web of civility. That's not a sign of weakness, that's strength. Strength means that you have confidence in your own views. If this election is about how we're going to fight to get nothing done, then I don't want any part of it. I don't want to be elected president to sit around and see gridlock just become so dominant that people literally are in decline in their lives. That is not my motivation. I got a lot of really cool things that I could do other than sit around being miserable, listening to people demonize me and me feeling compelled to demonize them. That is a joke. Elect Trump if you want that. If you want somebody who has a heart for people, who can fight for people and can fix these things, then there are a couple other people, and I believe I'm the best one. And that's what we should be focused on.